The development of fleet ballistic missile submarines, FBMs, specifically designed to carry nuclear missiles from undisclosed submerged oceanic locations, represented the linchpin of this strategy in the early 1960s. President Kennedy's speech to Congress was his first major address as Commander-in-Chief. He had been inaugurated only 10 days earlier after narrowly defeating Richard Nixon in the 1960 presidential election. The chosen quote from that address spoke to the president's assertion that might makes right. The best way to avoid a nuclear holocaust between the two superpowers of the time, the U.S. and the USSR, was to create weapons of such unimpeachable strength that just the idea of actually unleashing them was enough to suppress their use. Paradoxically, the superpowers took the world to the brink of nuclear war specifically for the purpose of preventing it from ever occurring. The dogma of mutually assured destruction, MAD, dictated that by amassing arsenals of increasingly potent weapons and building ever more sophisticated systems to deliver them, any first-strike nuclear offensive by the enemy would trigger a withering counterattack, killing millions, if not billions of people. The concept of a nuclear war ending the civilized world was not a far-fetched notion during that era. Could the fearsome technology created by man to end World War II be kept at bay? Albert Einstein famously said, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." The public's idea of a mushroom cloud appearing over their neighborhoods and businesses, signaling the imminent end of civilization, was deeply entrenched into the American psyche of the era. Fear of a nuclear war was real. Home fallout shelters, yellow and black civil defense signs on buildings indicating safe harbor during a nuclear war, potassium iodide tablets to protect the thyroid gland from excessive irradiation, and regular duck and cover drills practiced by students at their desks were among the manifestations of this phenomenon. The Pentagon was tasked with the daunting challenge of simultaneously amassing a fearsome nuclear stockpile and the means to use it, while taking steps to avoid any provocation that might trigger a full-scale response by the enemy. One of President Kennedy's first decisions in this realm was his enthusiastic approval of an ambitious operation to show the world in general, and the USSR in particular, that the American side of the MAD doctrine had real teeth. The pressure to display the U.S. nuclear might was prompted by the reemergence of the extensive testing of nuclear weapons by the Soviets. A brief moratorium on nuclear testing had been tacitly agreed upon by both the U.S. and USSR in 1958, but it lasted for only 3 years before the Soviets resumed unilateral testing in the fall of 1961 on a massive scale. The Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, had exploited the failed Cuban Bay of Pigs invasion by the U.S. in April 1961 as the justification for his country's actions. Speaking of that communist island just 90 miles south of Key West, the superpowers were just 1 year away from the brinksmanship of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the world ever came to a nuclear war. During the fall of 1961, the USSR conducted nearly 4 dozen nuclear weapons tests, including the largest ever explosion, a 63-megaton hydrogen bomb. This mother of all bombs, dubbed Tsar Bomba in the West, was detonated on 30 October 1961 in the atmosphere north of Russia. The bomb weighed 27 metric tons and measured 26 feet in length and 7 feet in diameter. To gain a sense of the enormity of the nuclear energy released in the 3-stage detonation of Tsar Bomba, the devastating weapon, Little Boy, dropped on Hiroshima, killing over 100,000 residents by the end of 1945, was only a 15-kiloton bomb, more than 4,000 times less powerful. The brazen Soviet disregard for the weapons testing moratorium, punctuated by the intimidatingly successful deployment of Tsar Bomba, warranted a swift and strong U.S. response. During the 3-year moratorium, the U.S. had greatly slowed further research and development in testing capabilities, meaning the Americans had to play some catch-up to match the Soviets. The public relations side of the Cold War was very important as well. The free world needed reassurance that American military prowess was every bit as advanced and fearsome as the communist Soviet capability. Hence, the important project dubbed Operation Dominic was hastily rolled out over several months in 1962 after President Kennedy approved the resumption of weapons testing on 5 September 1961. Operation Dominic was a multifaceted demonstration of the U.S. capability for nuclear destruction, or, as President Kennedy referred to it in his State of the Union message, our crucial deterrent. The scope was immense. More than 100 planes, 40 ships, and 28,000 personnel, both military and civilian, were needed to carry out the operation. A total of 36 separate test explosions were conducted in the Pacific Ocean between April and October 1962. The bombs were to be deployed in several ways. 29 freefall bombs dropped from B-52 aircraft, airdrop airburst events near Johnson and Christmas Islands, 5 high-altitude shots at Johnson Island, 1 underwater test several hundred miles off the U.S. West Coast, and 1 Polaris-launched airburst from a submarine in the South Pacific. This last method of deploying a nuclear weapon is our focus because the missile, a submarine-launched ballistic missile, SLBM, was launched from the USS Ethan Allen, SSBN 608.